Welcome everyone to our Vision Australia webinar on exercising in isolation for today, Thursday, the 25th of June. I'm Dan Casey, I'll be your host today, and today we have Christina Ovenden as our expert guest speaker. No pressure, Christina, expert guest speaker.
Thanks.
Before we start, I'd just like to do an acknowledgement to country and acknowledge the owners of the land, traditional owners of the land on which we all meet today. And I'd just like to pay my respect to their elders past, present and future. Today you'll be able to access a recording of the webinar later at our webpage on www.visionaustralia.org/check-in and chat. Now, during the webinar today, if you've got any questions, you can certainly submit them by using the chat functionality, which can be found at the bottom of the Zoom page. People who use screen readers, you can access the chat function through the keystroke Alt-H. And look, we'll answer our questions as best we can and as many as time permits. But look, if you've got any questions, that's a great thing to do, is just submit them via the chat. Okay, so we might get started. Welcome, Christina. Thanks for joining us today.
It's okay.
So, Christina, do you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your role and a bit about your background?
So I'm originally from New Zealand. Graduated from Otago University with a physio degree, some junior rotations in New Zealand, and then I moved over to the UK, to London. And I played rugby for Scotland, and then I played rugby league for England. So in that time I was working for the NHS and within adults. So lots of musculoskeletal adults, so long-term injuries, short-term injuries, rehab kind of things. Then I went and lived in Nepal for 3 months, as you do, worked at Benz and Plastics, and then worked back to the UK and then started specialising in children. So actually I'm employed with Vision Australia as a paediatric physio, but I have a bit of a hoppity scotch kind of a CV, and obviously an interest in exercise myself, and I've injured quite a few different things along my way. So I do kind of try to practice what I preach, and have a bit of an understanding at it from that side of the plinth of the rehab physio things.
Okay, and look, and I know through our discussions at work, we have talked a lot about rugby, but we've also spoken a lot about the work that you've done around exercise routines and classes for clients who are blind or have low vision as well.
Yeah. So with falls prevention, and I did within the NHS, hydrotherapy, lower limb rehab, back rehab, and then also with the children. When I started specialising in children, I did a mixed group with OT and physio, as well as lots of hydro. So quite a mixed bag of experience.
All right. We'll have to set aside another webinar to discuss the ins and outs of rugby union. Okay, so today's about exercising in isolation. So can you run us through some key exercise concepts? Things like what are different types and duration and intensity, just so we've got an idea.
Kind of, so there's a few bits to try to consider with your body. So the first one, kind of main one people know, is about aerobic exercise, and that's kind of getting your heart and lungs going. Then we've got some strength, so how much power can your muscle exert. Then we can incorporate some flexibility, so how long and strong are your muscles. And then there's balance and function. Actually, how do you then incorporate those different muscle groups together to do what you want them to do when you're wanting them to do an action. How long do you exercise for? How often? How many times a week or how many times a day? How hard do you do an activity, and how long for? So there's a few different things that when you're looking at exercise, what do you want to achieve, and then how can you tailor that as best for your situation?
Okay. So when we think of intensity, we often talk about moderate and vigorous. What might
Hmm.
be some examples of moderate intensity versus vigorous intensity?
Yeah, so there's you're wanting to make the body do a bit more than it would normally do, because our body is really clever and we adjust to the strength and activity level that we are doing at that time. And if we don't use it, you lose it, literally. So when we're talking about moderate exercise, we're saying at about 3 to 5-ish times the intensity that you would be at rest, and vigorous will be described at 6 times the intensity that you would be having at rest.
Okay, so if I go for a walk that's a little bit faster than I normally do, that would be an example maybe of moderate.
Moderate. Yeah, so that you can still hold a conversation, so that
Yep.
you're still able to breathe. But more than that, you would be doing if you were just strolling, smelling the
Okay.
flowers.
Yeah. And vigorous might be, what would be an example of a vigorous activity? A
More
test
kind of
match?
that would be above well, certainly what I'm capable of at the
Yeah.
moment. So vigorous is 6 times the intensity that you have at rest. So that would be kind of maybe more towards a jog or a run, or
Yep.
maybe some interval work, stairs. If your upper limb aren't so strong, maybe some kind of press ups, anything that so vigorous, you'd be a bit more short of breath with.
Okay,
That
so yeah, all right. That's good to know. And I know during lockdown or in isolation, we're going to talk a little bit more about uh, incidental exercise, which I think is also really important. So,
mm.
look, we all know that exercise is good for us. Like we all know that it's good for us physically, and obviously it's also good for us mentally. So, what do you think stops many of us from either doing exercise or even doing enough exercise?
Um, we Some people don't enjoy it, so I think it's about trying to find what activities or anything that you enjoy, then you're more likely to do it again. So that if you don't like it, then you'll just make every excuse under the sun not to do it. And different people like different things. Um, so some people like the description of yoga of pretending to be a tree and your branches, and then other people like, no. Some people like it to be very scripted. I've got 10 of this to do, and bam. Some people like getting really out of breath. So I think as long as whatever it is that you enjoy, keep going.
And I always find whenever I'm doing sort of vigorous exercise, it's almost like time slows down where I think I've been going for ages. And then I think I've
30
been going
seconds
for
is not.
35 seconds.
Yeah.
This 50-meter pull feels like it's a kilometer long. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, there's other, so yes, you have like the scripted type
Mm.
exercise, but like you said about the incidental, gardening. If I was to say to you, Dan, I want you to do 2 hours of exercise this weekend. No, couldn't possibly fit it in. No. Oh, can tidy up my garden though. Boom. And then your time flies. So trying to think about what activity that you would not be doing at rest would then count as your exercise.
Yeah, I know my dad we had a large suburban block, and my father would often talk about, mowing the lawn, doing the hedges, all of that was a pretty solid workout
Yep.
for him. Okay, so when we think about exercise, what are some sort of guidelines based on how old I am or where I might be? What are some things I need to think about?
Yes. So the Victorian government for our region as well, and Australia Health, they all follow the World Health Organization recommendations. And the World Health Organization have split it up into sort of 3 brackets, really. So you've got your 5 to 17-year-olds. And what we need to consider there is that your bone growth is still occurring. So you want to try to get lots of directions, lots of variety of movements so that you give that bone a really good chance to grow and not do any damage. Their recommendations are 60 minutes a day of moderate to vigorous exercise, 3 or more days a week. And the next bracket they go up to is your 18 to 64-year-olds. And these what we call healthy adults. So there's been a direct relationship between the physical exercise and cardiorespiratory health, reducing your risk of heart disease, cardiovascular disease, stroke, and hypertension. So there's been lots of research and evidence to show that this can help, as well as to reduce your risk of back and hip fractures. So what they've recommended for this age group is 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week. So that you could chop that down into like 30 minutes, 5 days a week, or you know, an hour. How many times would that be?
You can do it.
2.5. So, but if you bump that up to vigorous intensity exercise, you only have to do 75 minutes per week.
Well, that's interesting. So if you're doing vigorous exercise, it chops it in half, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
And but they've also recommended that this can be done in bouts of 10 minutes. So that's kind of then when it comes into that more incidental bit, you know, you're gardening or you're vacuuming the house. If you've got a bigger region, that could be your 10 minutes, and then that could count towards your 150 minutes of exercise.
Yeah, and undoubtedly my own experience is the more you do it, the easier it becomes aerobically and fitness-wise, but you kind of, I find I really start to crave it and enjoy it. What about 65 plus, Christina?
So this bracket, what we're trying to do there is to reduce the risks or complications of the aging process. So our muscles change fibers once we start to get over 28, and our bones as well. So what we're trying to do is whatever you've got, we want to keep it going as best as you can and prevent any progression. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So this bracket needs to have a few more extra precautions, and you need to seek medical advice before you're doing any exercise. If you do too much, it can be not great afterwards. So that's why we need to get this bracket cleared off by a doctor or any kind of health professional, just to make sure that things are safe. But in this bracket though, anything is better than nothing. So even, sorry, in this one here, they recommend 150 minutes again per week, and the 75 minutes of the vigorous per week. And once again, this can be done in 10 bouts. But if your mobility isn't very good, they want you to do exercise that's going to prevent falls 3 times a week. Your muscle strengthening should include major muscle groups 2 or more times a week. And like I said, even if you can't do that recommendation, something is better than nothing.
Okay, so with the poor mobility, what might be an example of an exercise that can help improve that mobility for people?
So there's been really good research for Tai Chi.
All right.
Which you can do in a small space. There's a whole list called the Falls Prevention Program, and it's a whole list of exercise that can be done in a home, and it doesn't need any special equipment. So what we're really wanting is our bigger muscle groups in our lower body coordinating together, and ideally having some weight through us. So we're going to challenge where the muscles can go to, so that whole length strength relationship is working to make sure that the balance can keep going.
Yeah, I have to admit, I've noticed my own balance get. I mean, my dad has Meniere's disease, but my own balance is not as great as it used to be. The other thing that makes me laugh is I've got an 18-year-old who's got his gym set up in the garage, and every now and then during COVID, I've tried to go and do some sort of resistance, and I look at what he's got on the bench press, and the stupid boy brain part of me is like, oh yeah, I can do that. But the mature head goes, no, take some off. It's okay. You're not going to be judged. So I've kind of resorted to doing more repetitions of less weight.
Yeah, and that's the thing that happens with our muscle fibers when they change when we get older. So those power muscles diminish. Yes, and we actually end up with more of the slower twitch ones. So after 28, you won't be able to lift. Like your power ratio is gone after 28. So now your brain is going, oh yeah, just slap that one on. I could do that. Your muscle actually won't be able to do that anymore.
And that's a really good point, because it kind of leads to the next one, is that, you know, the mind plays a huge role in this. But so if I'm just starting out, what do I need to consider and be aware of in terms of putting together like a isolation exercise routine?
There's a few safety points, you know, that you'd have to really make sure that were covered before you started to do any one. So, I mean, the main one is, are you even medically stable enough to be able to complete 10 minutes of moderate exercise? So that would be kind of the standard one. If you're not, then go to a health professional and seek advice. We need to look after your heart and lungs, because that's the one that's going to do your circulation, your blood pressure, and that's the one that's really going to make sure that you can keep going with your exercise. Your breathing, can you actually take the bigger breaths to recover from your exercise? Your organs, they need to be able to get the nutrients into your muscles and then take the waste away. Looking after your blood sugars, what happens during exercise, how do you respond afterwards, and even your muscles and joints. Like, I've had a few injuries and my right ankle is not as flexible as my left. So the exercise that you want to be able to do, can your joints and muscles actually get you through what you want to be able to do? So that's kind of looking after the physical bit of you. We then need to make sure that the environment that you're in, do you have enough space to exercise in? Kind of looking at probably about a 3 by 3 meter space roughly, with no furniture or a stable chair, or being able to put an exercise mat on the ground. Do you have the clothing and footwear? We want it to be breathable, loose fitting clothing so that it can breathe, but the shoes, we want them to be supportive and laced up firmly so that we're not sliding around in there. The exercise that you're going to be doing, do you have access to the instruction and direction? So if it's a YouTube, is there an audio description for it? Can you follow the pictures? If it's written, can you, is it of a font size and a form that you can follow? And I think this is kind of potentially where Vision Australia could come in, is if you have a point of contact, whether it's a person that you trust there, an OT, an orientation mobility specialist, would they be able to help you out maybe for that initial exercise, see how you're going? Do you need a little bit of help in terms of audio description, and then once you've done it a couple of times, you're off? Other one I'd be wanting to do is, if you live alone.
Okay, this is really important, isn't it, Christina,
yeah.
this one?
Does someone know that you're going to be starting this new exercise, and can you touch base with them after you've finished, just so that you can know that someone's accountable, or know that you can discuss something with it. Oh, that was over there, that chair got in the way, or actually I feel fine, probably could have gone a bit harder, or I'm still a bit short of breath now, and it's been probably about an hour or two and I'm still short of breath. Yeah. So just being able to have that bounce off someone afterwards to see how you coped with it. Was it enough for you? Was it too much?
Yeah, what's this pain in my left shoulder that won't go away?
And and that kind of goes on to how to avoiding injuries. You need to kind of listen to your body. Okay. Is this, so after the effect after an exercise is you would have normal muscle soreness. But what that would be tenderness within the muscle belly of where it is. And that would last 24 to 48 hours after you start any new exercise.
And Christina, is that because I haven't used that muscle like that for a while?
Yeah, so what happens is
different to injury, isn't it?
Yeah, so when you've made it work and you haven't used it for a while, you create a little inflammation process within the muscle. Now what that does is the muscle then goes, oh, I've done a bit more than what I've done before. I need to get stronger.
Yeah.
So that 24 to 48 hours would be the normal response. Anything longer than that, you've done too much.
And typically, would you find as you start to do exercise regularly that soreness would start to
go away? My
favorite words, dissipate.
And then you need to increase either the repetitions that you've done, the intensity that you've done, because your muscles and your body have adjusted to a new normal.
Right. And that's why it's important to do exercise regularly to see gain and advancement.
Yeah. So you need to kind of be doing, you start to lose the effect from your thyroid, and that's the one for the metabolism one. After 24 hours, that starts to wane. So if you're doing stuff for weight loss, ideally you need to be exercising minimum every second day.
Right.
And then for the muscle group, if it's an individual muscle group, you need it to have that 24 to 48 hours rest. So if I was doing an arm workout for my bicep, that's going to be sore for 1 to 2 days afterwards. So then on the third day, I could make it work again.
Okay, we've just
You
got
see
a
the
question.
difference?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just talking about questions, Christina, we just got a question here about what are your thoughts on muscle imbalances? When I stretch, my left hamstrings are tight and my right abductors are tight, which suggests to me that different muscle groups are doing the work on different sides. How would
Yeah.
you address this? I'm impressed they
Yeah.
know what an abductor is. I
So
thought they'd
that one
steal your
can,
children, but yeah.
that one's a bit tricky. So it can be coming from the bottom. So what position are your feet in? It sounds like there's a slight little bit of a twist. So our feet can go inward and outward and up and down. So if I've got one foot slightly turned out and the other one slightly turned in, or one way or another, then that will set my thigh bones off on a slightly different angle. Or the other ways, it could be coming from the top down. So is my pelvis, have I got one side up or is it twisted slightly forward? So yeah, so I did, if that one, for that kind of one, I'd be trying to get a mirror. And then if you can get some dots and place them onto the front of your hip bones, onto your knees and onto the front of your ankle, and then if you can see that lined up and then you're doing a squat, then it makes it a bit easier to see, is it coming from the bottom or is it coming from the top? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. And so
That
if someone was blind or have low vision, getting someone to observe how.
yes. Or
Right.
even if you were walking down a corridor or walking down a road, getting someone to video for you from behind or from the front, and then
Yeah.
you can slow down that video and see, oh, what's happening with that foot? Oh my goodness, I'm stepping much longer on this foot than the other, or this heel is hitting the ground, but then my foot's skewing out sideways, and that one's going straight.
That's
So
really interesting because I had
yeah,
an injury a couple of years ago, and that's what the physio got me to do out the front,
yeah,
just sort of run a little bit, and he just videoed me on an iPad to sort
yep.
of analyze. And it's kind of scary when you slow it down. You just think I am a sort of rambling oaf as I run.
So for some people with vision impairment, I would probably use their own feedback.
Yep.
So if they're walking down somewhere, it can be quiet. Listen to your feet. Do you feel like one foot is hitting the ground harder than the other? Is my heel hitting the ground on the same side as this other heel? Am I rolling off the outside of that foot the same as the other, or my big toe? And then that can go to, oh, actually, those do kind of feel the same. Then the next bit is if you pop your hand on the bony bit of one side of your hip and the other bit, and then start walking, then you'll be able to feel, oh, I'm completely twisted over to one side. So if you were blind, those would be the internal feedback kind of things that you may be able to correct yourself.
Okay, and we've got another question around bone density.
Mm-hmm.
So, question asking, at the moment my bone percentage is 3.8. I'm a middle-aged woman. Is that good, or do I need to push towards higher bone density to prepare for my older years?
I'm not. I would have to look up.
Defer to
I'd have to
another
Google
expert.
up. But yeah, I'm not accurate on my percentages. I'm sorry. I would have to Google that up and have a look.
Yep.
There, I mean, I'd probably be having a chat to your GP, and if they've given, so the medications now for what they call osteopenia, which is before you get to osteoporosis, is really effective. Okay. So if you have any worries about that, I'd probably be having a chat to your GP.
But bone density is something to be aware of.
Really big
as we get older. I've had older
so
relatives have nasty breaks from not great falls, but the breaks have been particularly nasty.
And that kind of comes in with the falls preventions. If your muscles aren't so long and strong, also how you fall is much harder. Instead of having your muscle to be able to control your body weight down slowly, potentially even having that sensation that you're falling, so you can do what we call a saving strategy, popping your hand out, turning slightly so that you have a bit more of a cushion with the fall. Instead, it can be just like a bam. more like a sack of spuds hitting. And then the bones themselves, when they're a little bit chalky, they tend to shatter into smaller pieces rather than it being a bigger snap. And then those fragments, because they're that little bit chalky, the blood vessels and the healing in them isn't as great. So that's also why they can take longer to heal.
Okay, great.
So,
all right.
Yeah, I'd chat with your GP.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I
I'd
think
have to Google
that's
percentages.
fine. But I think it is really important that, if people have some of those really specific questions, we'll do our best, but certainly talk to your
I'm not an expert on that one, sorry.
That's okay. So let's talk about goals, because often when we're talking about exercise, we always hear about goals. So during isolation or this sort of period of limited access maybe to getting out, what sort of goals should I set for myself around exercise?
I think trying to keep it realistic.
That's always my problem.
Yeah. I'm going to climb a mountain before I'm 50. Those kind of things. Kind of being kind to yourself. Are you wanting to finish a task? So are you wanting to climb this mountain?
Yep.
If you're wanting to climb this mountain before you're 50, what do you have to do to be able to do that? How big is it? How long is the average length of time that you'd have to be walking for it? Can you practice? Can you break it down then into smaller increments? So if it's 4 hours to get up, then can you do an hour, then an hour and a half, then 2 hours, so that you start to build up to where you want to be? If it's being able to keep up with the kids in the playground, so that kind of thing would be a bit more of a shorter, sharper kind of exercise. So then that kind of one would be more of an interval nature of being able to do a burst, have a rest, being able to do a burst, and then have a rest. So it's kind of, what do you want to be able to do? Do you want to be able to dance and do a turn or do this kind of movement? So then we need to have really good ankle movement. We need to have really good control over your hips. So I just kind of go, what do you want to achieve and where do you want to go with it? And then make it into smaller blocks.
Yeah, and I think you've highlighted some really important points there about, I like the notion of it being realistic. And I always think I've always swum reasonably regularly over my life, but there's been intervals sometimes between swimming where I haven't done it for a while. And I always think, I can just pick up from where I left off a year and a half ago. Answer,
the brain remembers.
Halfway up my first lap, I'm thinking, if only I could get like a snorkel with some Ventolin attached to it, I'd be fine. But it is about going, it's okay, as you said, I really like what you said, be kind to yourself, like, ease into it, but make it a little tough, a little more intense or a bit longer each time. Is something like that a good approach?
Yeah, and just even listening to your body, and then keeping a track, like you said. So you used to be able to do 200 meters like that. This time round, you lost your breath after 50. Okay, gosh, that's where I'm at now. So next time I'm gonna try to at least get to that 50 mark, and then I'm going to try to get to 75. And then the next time round, did I get to that 75? Oh, not quite. Right, I'm just going to stay to that 50 again. But if things aren't progressing like you would normally, so if you're more tired than usual, if something isn't quite right and you feel it, or pain or an injury kind of thing, I'd say more along a tendon or a bony point, then that's then when I go, something's not quite right here. I probably need to see someone about it.
Yeah, and part of it, I think, sometimes, is about your own pride around the view you have of yourself, and as I've got older, I've had to realise that view is different now, and I have to be happy with what I can do.
Analogy I'll use is, so when I was 6, I used to be able to go all the way across the monkey bars and back.
Yeah. Now I get asked to leave the playground.
Yeah. You're not supposed to go there by yourself, Dan,
Yeah, I know that. But I think it is interesting, that whole thing about that goal that you set yourself. And I think you've raised a couple of really good things. If you've got something coming up, like a walking trip or whatever, that you can work towards that
Yep.
in increments. Or if you're starting out again, set yourself goals of just, okay, I'm going to walk around the block tonight. And then next day I'm going to walk around the block, but I might walk just a little bit of it a little faster,
Yep.
and sort of building up
So yeah, so
like that.
if you've got a calendar written up or your diary, just keeping a little track, because sometimes it's kind of hard to remember. So I did around the block and this time, and actually I felt okay there, or whew, I didn't. Right. So I'm just going to take my pace down just a little bit and then see how I go. So sometimes like just doing a little note on the calendar or on the diary, because then when it comes to 3 or 4 weeks down the track, you're like, I don't think I'm getting any better. And then if you go back to that first week where you were completely out of breath when you just walked around the block once, and you're like, oh, I can do that twice now. Sometimes we forget where we started.
Yeah, and that also, makes me think about some of the apps and various fitness things that
Yeah.
I mean, I love that data because it gives me a sense of self-righteousness and that inner glow of doing something that's good for me. But what are your thoughts about that, collecting that data and looking at how long you've been doing and steps and all of those things?
For some people, it can be really helpful.
Mm.
So I mean, now you can get a heart rate monitor that goes on your wrist.
Yeah.
With your watch, you can get the phone apps that can tell you exactly where you've walked, and it'll show it to you on a little map. If that works for you, it can be really helpful. It's not what everyone likes.
No, it's not. I mean, I'm just laughing about Google Maps told me in April I went to 4 places and they were only 2 kilometres from my home, talking about lockdown, which probably is a nice segue into thinking about, we've been in isolation, our ability to get out isn't as much. But what might be some ideas about how we can still exercise or start or complement our exercising whilst we're in these limited, lockdown situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think this one, YouTube is such an amazing tool now. You can type in anything that you want. So there's lots of different aerobics classes, high intensity interval classes. So what, if people have heard the term HIIT training, high intensity interval training, there's quite a lot of good research behind it. And there's a couple of variations. One, you work for 20 seconds, rest for 10, or another one where you work for 40 seconds, rest for 20. And often you're using your own body weight against gravity. So then you only need kind of that 3 by 3 meter space or enough space for an exercise mat.
So using your own body weight against gravity, that seems
Gravity.
like push-ups would be
But
an example, or
yeah,
chin-ups, and
well, you need a bar for that one.
yeah, you would, wouldn't you?
Squats of different,
Yep.
lunges, press-ups of different variations, planks of different variations. So you
Okay.
can make your upper and your lower work.
And I know the British television BBC Dr. Michael Mosley, I think
He
he,
did.
he did some stuff, so people could probably
Yeah.
find some
There's
information.
so many different variations, free variations. Body coach Joe Wicks, he does a whole lot of different ones. Dance classes, yoga classes, Pilates classes, and you don't even need any equipment. Or if you did want to make things a bit harder, nowadays you can actually buy the therapy bands, the elastic bands.
Yep.
Online if you want a bit of resistance. Bag of books,
Yep.
can of beans, water bottles. The good thing with the water bottle is you can change how much is in it. So you can half fill
Change
your
the
water
weight.
bottle, yeah, or full water bottle. So
Talk to me a little bit about, you mentioned yoga and Pilates.
hmm,
I always think of that as very gentle exercise, and I have to slow down my voice and lower the octave a bit to talk about yoga. But obviously yoga and Pilates, I mean, they can be quite intense workouts, yeah?
yeah. So the yoga, there's different ones where you hold a pose or ones where you're moving through poses.
Hmm.
And once again, it's using your own body weight against gravity and you're controlling the movement.
And what about flexibility? I mean, obviously
Hmm.
those things are probably good for flexibility. And
Excellent. Yeah. So we want the muscle to be long and strong so that we can use it throughout the range, so that we're using it more in a way. So if I'm going to pick up something off the ground, my ankle has to be able to bend, my knee has to be able to bend, and so does my hip.
right, yeah.
and then we've got to be able to lift it all the way up. So that's kind of where these kind of exercises can be really helpful. Sometimes as well, they can make you stop thinking about the outside world and actually tune back in. Where is my knee in relation to my foot? I have no idea. Ooh, what did she say? She said it's supposed to be turned out at 45 degrees with my knee over it. So those kind of ones can be really helpful.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that, because I know I've done yoga on and off, and I really have to concentrate on the instruction, because I find some of those poses quite challenging to sort of position myself, and I'm invariably always doing it with one eye open just to see how other people are doing it. And the other thing I've learned is that some people are much more flexible than others, so you run the risk
Yeah,
sometimes, don't you, of comparing yourself unfairly to other people.
which is a bit, so 10% of the population naturally are hypermobile.
Mm.
And so their joint muscles and joints are naturally more flexible than the other. And then with different ethnic groups, you can have that even more. So it's a bit, that's also, we've been doing it at home. You've only got yourself to compare against.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Mm.
You've talked a little bit about the high intensity stuff.
Mm.
What about walking? I think walking is really
Excellent.
underrated, yes?
Brilliant. Yep, absolutely. Whether some people put music on or some people like to concentrate on their rhythm. So getting yourself up to a different pace, changing your pace, just being outside, even tacking in a few exercises along the way. So going around part of the park and then doing some squats or some lunges. Or if there's a park bench there, you can do some little tricep dips or some push-ups against the bench, and then keep walking. And then that way you can get a bit more of a whole body workout out of it.
Now, I've seen people walking and they've got their hands above their heads. I don't know if they think a rapture or something's coming and they're going to be lifted up, but what's that about? Is that just
Is
weird
that the
people where I live?
Qigong, or is that? I think there's a different stuff. Is that with the where they do like a shake kind of one and they're moving?
Yeah, I think it's about it's harder on your body having your hands
Hmm.
above your head. Your heart's got to work harder, but it always looks. I always find it looks funny, but
I mean, good for shoulder mobility.
yeah,
Keeping your arm up there can help open up your chest.
yep,
I
yep.
don't
I don't
mind.
know. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe
if
maybe
people
they're
are
just
at their
doing it to
desk,
confuse me.
if they're doing and they're sitting here for a whole lot of time, maybe they just like feeling that open
Yep.
kind of movement.
And the other good thing about walking, I guess, is that incidental stuff which you can do, which is you can walk to where you need to go rather than, do you need to catch transport or get a
Yeah,
lift
really good
everywhere?
for your bone health, that weight bearing, that gravity getting pressure down through your bones.
And I know our CEO, Ron Hooton, is a big fan
Yeah,
of walking or tramping, as your
doesn't
fellow
cost you anything, some
other good
shoes and
book. Yeah,
out you go.
yep, okay.
Your time, your when the other one is you can slip it into the day when you want to do it.
Yeah, and we're still roughly around that general recommendation that I think people are familiar with, which is about 10,000 steps as a way of walking towards that, but obviously starting, with a smaller amount if you're not
Yeah.
that fit at the moment.
So that's a way where that would be a nice way to get you walking up, but then the World Health recommendation would still be that 150 minutes of moderate exercise. So that's that pushing yourself
A little bit
3
harder.
to 5 times what you'd be doing at rest. And
Yep,
as you get fitter, that would be a bit more. So then that's kind of when your 10,000 measure might drop off a bit
yep.
because
Okay.
it's easier for you to get that bit.
Yep. Um, Other things, playing with kids, I suppose, if you've got
Ah,
young children in your
yeah.
life at the moment.
Pop out, do some kicking, some passing with the ball, frisbee, hide and seek. Then that can also get incorporated into your exercise. Um,
Yeah.
cycling,
Cycling.
cycling shops have gone crazy, and that's still safe, health wise for you to do in this COVID time.
And it's probably been good when there's been less cars on the road as well. Now, cycling's one of those activities, I think, what's it called? Like a gliding activity. So you're not putting as much, it's not like running or walking, is it, where you're putting a lot of
Yeah,
gravity?
so if you've
on
got
the
a bit of
joints.
wear and tear in your knees and your hips, kind of thing, it's a nice smooth movement where it'll still get your thigh muscles working. But even just being out in the fresh air, getting yourself outside, can make you feel good as well.
I think we haven't really touched too much on that sort of emotional or psychosocial
Mm.
side of exercising. So why does exercising like that
Big.
make us feel good? What can
There's
you
a
share
couple
with
of
us?
things. So when we get our heart rate up, there's the thing called a runner's high, where our brain actually releases serotonin, which is the thing that makes us feel good when we're exercising. So have you heard about
Yep,
exercise addicts?
yep.
And that is actually because their brain needs that stimulus. So we feel good when we're going out to do the exercise. The other one is we feel good when we've accomplished something. When
Yes.
we've given ourselves a task and we actually do that task, the feedback that our brain gives us is, you did good, you finished that task.
Okay.
And then there's another, even more physiological, is sweat. In our sweat, it's not just salt and water, it's actually our stress hormones. So when we are out and exercising and we're getting a little bit of a sweat on, we're getting rid of those stress hormones. So that's another reason why we feel good.
Okay. So there's some obviously, I mean, as I said, we intrinsically know that these things are good for us, but it's that
Mm.
turning it into actually what we're actually doing, isn't it? That sort of
Mm-hmm.
taking that step. I remember hearing someone speak at a breakfast. They were talking about exercise, and the person talked about, often people set themselves these really lofty goals that they're going to go for a run every morning. And he said invariably what happens is they last a week and then it
Yeah.
drops off. So his view was, if you're going to set yourself that goal, don't make the decision about not doing it tucked up in bed. Actually get up, get ready to start the exercise, and then if you don't want to do it, make the decision then. And he said that sort of shifts your mindset because you're already up and dressed and ready to, you may as well do it. So there's probably a couple of the tricks you can use
Is
for
it,
yourself.
and there's also even like thinking about your week. So how will I realistically fit this 150 minutes of moderate exercise into my week? So my partner works late on that night, so I'm going to be have to home. So that's not going to be really achievable on that day.
Yeah, so don't set yourself up for failure for that.
And try to then space it out over the week so that you're not doing it all at the beginning of the week, because then that's going to be really hard to fit all of your other things in. Actually, I'm dropping the kids off over there. That is when I've got some time to do for what I'd like to do. I'm going to take myself off for a jog. Some people like going out first thing in the morning before the kids get up or before anyone is out and about, and other people are evening owls and like to do
Yeah.
something after work. So whatever is your natural tendency, then that's kind of what I'd advise to keep going with, because that's more likely to be achievable.
That's a really good point. I know during this COVID stuff, and I've been working from home. My regular exercise has always been, well, for the last year and a bit, has been swimming. So I haven't been
Mm-hmm.
able to do that. I've sort of gone for a lot of walking, brisk walking, a couple of jogs. But what's been really good has been we've been picking up my 17-year-old, well, he's now 18, from school, just to give him a bit of a break. But it's more about my partner and I being able to go down to the park with the dog for half an hour before we meet him. So we've been able to sort of try and build that in for a number of days
Yeah,
during the week.
and achievable.
And really, and enjoyable,
And
absolutely
achievable.
enjoyable. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of stuff, Christina. What might be some key take-home messages for people?
Well, the World Health Organization recommendation of the 150 moderate intensity exercise per week will be the big one, or 75 minutes of the vigorous exercise. But once again, these can be done in 10-minute bouts. So how are you then really going to be able to put those into your day? Remembering something is better than nothing.
I like that
So
one, yeah.
So just even trying to do, whether it's the groceries or whether it's, popping out and going to the shop for your milk, that's a little bit further than this one, than the one that's around the corner, and then that could be something that then you've done a little bit for that day. Okay. So just kind of being a bit gentler on yourself, doing what you can when you can. And if something doesn't feel right, go and see someone. So you're like, I should have recovered from that by now. Or it's still a bit hard and I've been going at this for a couple of weeks. Or, God, every time I lift my shoulder up or my knee is sore and it's been sore for longer than 2 days now, you probably need to go and see someone and do what you like and what you think is fun. You're more likely to do it again and you feel good afterwards.
Yeah,
So,
I really like that one about do what you enjoy. And the other thing I think is as you get better at something and more competent, it actually does become more enjoyable.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, those first couple of workouts when you've done nothing, uh, it's a slog, because your body hasn't done it for a while. So then that's okay. Just be a bit gentle on yourself and go, yeah, I've got to get back into that again. Not, oh God, I could run for half an hour. I could finish that 5K last time. Why couldn't I? Well, if you haven't done it for 3 months, you're probably not likely. But even after 2 weeks of not doing exercise, your body will start to readjust and not be as fit as it was.
Yeah, because that's a question I had, which is it will readjust and not be at fit, but can you keep, I hear the phrase residual fitness. Can you generally, how long would
So
a stage of residual fitness last for?
it depends on what exercise level you were at beforehand. So, I mean, in terms of rugby, some of the professional guys, they can get themselves back up to test fitness in 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's amazing.
They also have professional dietitians and they have everyone else all around them as well. But I'd probably say if there's an exercise that you haven't done for probably about 2 or 3 weeks, and then you try and do that again, you've probably lost.
Okay. And another question, I'm using this as my personal sort of fitness and exercise Q&A. I'm also intrigued that there's times when I feel great doing an exercise or doing an exercise routine. It's really good. And then 3 days later or 4 days later, I'm doing it again and it's not as easy. I feel a bit out of sorts. What's
Yeah. Well, how did
going
you
on there?
sleep?
Yeah,
How did
good
you sleep?
question.
What else is happening in your day? Did
Yep.
you have a really horrendous meeting? Or, someone like, how are you
Had to
feeling
host a
with it?
webinar. Yep.
Yeah, I know, such hard work. So there can be lots of other things into why we feel good about ourselves and why we feel good. Different foods.
Yep.
So when I was playing rugby, some of the girls couldn't cope with red meat the day before a game. I could. Um, so there can be a whole lot of different components as to why we're feeling good at that time and not in another. And that's kind of where I was saying about keep a track of what you're doing. Be kind to yourself. It's okay. Women, 2 days before their period, become more sensitive to pain. So these 2 days before your cycle is due, you won't be able to exercise as well as you had before. So there's hormonal, not so much for you, but there's a few different components as to why
Okay,
people.
there's a lot going on there. But again, I really, really like the message about be kind to yourself.
Mm,
And I think that's a
Something's
really
better than nothing.
all right. That's great. Look, I think that's where we're going to wrap up today,
Cool.
Christina. There's no more questions coming through, so that's great. So thanks so much for your time today. Really informative, and as always, thank you for participating. Great to have Vision Australia staff involved in the delivery of these webinars. So just a big thank you also to the participants today, and also big thanks to the people behind the scenes. A lot goes into these, so thanks to Naomi and Courtney. I'm going to embarrass you by thanking you. And just remember that Vision Australia is still offering services via telehealth in all states except South Australia. So telehealth appointments can be conducted over the phone or video conferencing, email, or a combination. You can contact our assistive technology help desk if you'd like any support to set up for telehealth. So please contact us on 1300 847466. That's 1300 847466, or email info, that's info, at visionaustralia.org for more information and to get started. Now, We have a couple more check-in and chats, so please join us next Tuesday the 30th for the latest adaptive technology. That should be fantastic. Will be discussed by the special guest speakers from Humanware, who have developed a whole range of devices for blindness and low vision. And also, just to let you know that the check-in and chat series is coming to a close. The last session will be held on Thursday, the 2nd of July. It's been great to keep connected during the past few months, and we hope you've really enjoyed the series. I know the ones I've been involved in, I have. We are currently developing other webinars that we hope will be available in the near future, and we'll let you know when they're ready. So please continue to check our website and your emails. You're also welcome to check out recordings, obviously, of the past sessions, and you can get to those through our webpage at www.visionaustralia.org/check-in and chat/webinars. So thanks everybody for today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll have you back when we're doing the next webinar. Bye for now.